All right, so in tonight's Fusing Friday, we're going to talk about jewelry findings and settings. So I expanded it. Originally, it was jewelry findings, although a lot of the findings out there, if we just focused on only the findings, it probably would have been a 10-minute presentation, because I think a lot of the findings that are out there, they're kind of similar. So if you're looking up a Bale, for example, for a pendant, you'll see kind of the same thing. It might be tweaked a little bit, but most of them are very similar. Before we start out, though, we'll talk a little bit about your settings, because by choosing different settings or methods of setting your fused glass jewelry, you can change the price point of your jewelry. You know, for example, if you were to get a bracelet that just you take pieces of glass and glue it onto a silver plated bracelet, it might be something you could sell for $36. You know, if you were to set it in sterling silver, it might be something you could get $500 for. But along with changing that price point, you also have to have a budget for inventory of those types of settings. So I think a lot of people will default to the less expensive silver plated ones, but there are some that are solid sterling silver, for example, that are also available if you look for them. Another consideration is what kind of jewelry skills you have. For example, you know, Bobby Wilson, one of our Helions, is extremely talented with beadwork. So she'll enhance her glass pieces with some beadwork. You could do wire wrapping, you could do bezel setting. So it just kind of depends on what skills you have. And I would also say how much time it takes you, because is your value to your jewelry, is it centered around creating beautiful pieces of glass, or is it about making whole pieces of jewelry? So you'll find a sweet spot in there once you figure out what kind of time you want to spend. And then also on your settings, there's aesthetics to take into consideration. What do you like? You know, there's different styles. We'll look at a bunch of different ones. And then also displays. So if you're making jewelry that's a lot more expensive, then you also want your displays to reflect that. So when somebody walks up, let's say if you're at a show, my favorite horror story was a friend was selling hand lamp worked jewelry at a show, and the person next to her was doing bottle cap jewelry. So that person's pieces were $5. My friend's pieces were $150. Somebody walked up, looked at a piece of her jewelry and said, how much? She said 75. The person put 3/4 on the table and walked off. So you kind of want your displays to reflect the quality of your jewelry and also maybe the price point as well. So if I were to say, hey, what are you going to do with your piece of glass to put it on a chain? Almost everybody would answer the Raku glue-on Bale. This one is one of the most available jewelry options, I guess, for doing not stained glass, but fused glass. They also use them for other things. For example, there are some people that make Scrabble tile pendants. So they'll use them for gluing onto other things, not only glass, but we have bought thousands and thousands of these things. They're cost effective, and they come in a lot of designs. So for example, here's one of the Raku Bales that is a dog paw, and you'll see they have hearts. Some of these with the design on, like the dog paw, I've seen people actually put that design on the front of the glass piece to make it part of the design, but they're fairly reasonably priced. You know, the basic ones are anywhere from $16 to $18 for 25. You can easily attach it with glue, although which glue is a heated religious debate. My preference is E6000. It also works with cords or chains. The hole is big enough that you have some flexibility with that. And like I said, there's different designs. Something to consider with this, though, if you have a customer who wants to wear this pendant every single day, this Bale is not a good choice. So you have to kind of take that into consideration as well. Since it is plated, the plating will come off over time. It will rub off and leave the base metal, which can also turn like a customer's neck green or whatever. So that plating will wear off over time. Now, the good news is too, if you have something that's super special, they also do make sterling silver versions of these bales. But one thing we used to do is we would keep maybe 5 of those sterling ones. If a customer came up and said, you know, I'm going to wear this all the time, it's my favorite pendant, we could pop off the bales and then put on a sterling bale and then charge them the upgraded price. So that's something else that we did. By the way, if we did actually intend to pop those bales off, we did not use E6000 because we couldn't get it off. We used the two-part, it was like some two-part glue that we got at Helios. It's a little bit more of a brittle glue, but we could pop those bales off pretty easily and then replace them with these. So let's see, like I said, the cons on this, the finish can wear off because it's plated. Oh, another pro is that they do come in gold and different colors. So you can find bronze or, you know, copper colors from different companies. There is a gold plated version and the price is a little bit more. But I think one of the cons of using these is that if you do a search on fused glass pendants, it is the default. It's the go-to bale that people use. So people's glass, their pendants look similar. So if you're trying to set your pieces apart, you might look at some different options. But they are easy and they're affordable, so they are a good option for most people. There is another one. I bought some earrings once at an airport gift shop, and it had on top of it something called an up-eye bail. And these are basically little glue-on loops that can go on the top. But if you do find these online, it's hard to find them. But when you do, you need to make sure that that glue pad is not as thick as your pendant. Another consideration, something you need to pay attention to, is that you wouldn't necessarily want to do a full fuse on your piece. If you did a full fuse on your pendant, then one of the things is that your edges are round and this type of bale won't work. So you would end up doing less of a fire polish, so you had more squarish edges, and then this would glue easily on the top. We also found that these worked really well for earrings. They made really nice earrings, or they were good if you had some jewelry that was actually transparent. You know, like maybe your piece of glass you made, you could see all the way through. You wouldn't necessarily want that silver bale on the back. You could put this kind of up eye on the top. The next step on it is easy. You add an ear wire or a jump ring, and these are usually sterling silver when I find them, but they are a little bit harder to find. So with that, we'll move on to earrings. And I always have to talk about this. Hint, it's the most popular jewelry that we found when we did shows. And I've mentioned this in Fusing Friday before, but we would do pendants, and just I assumed that everybody wore pendants, and people would ask us for earrings, and I hated doing earrings because they had to match. But I would take a pendant, I would cut it, and they'd have to come back next week, and then they'd have an earring. My husband made me go out to restaurants and actually count how many people were wearing earrings only, earrings and a pendant, or a pendant. And when we started doing the research, we found out that most people, when they're wearing a piece of jewelry, are wearing earrings. So I was completely surprised by that. So basically, you can get a bale, you add an ear wire, and voila, you have a pair of earrings. The other thing is on the left-hand side, that is one of the Raku Bales for earrings. So you'll see that it's fairly minimal, it's very small, and it just has a little loop on the top. Nothing fancy, but that's another one of their bales.
Kat, could you mute everybody?
Everyone please mute, or somebody.
Yeah, hold on one sec, let me mute. All righty, if you guys have anything, any comments, just be sure and unmute yourself. We've got some noise in the background, so we're just gonna mute all. All right, there you go. If you have anything, be sure and unmute, and we'll go from there. Oops, get out of there. Okay. All right, so one of the biggest concerns that we found over time is that fused glass is usually very thick. Therefore, earrings can be extremely heavy. And so that can mean that they're going to be uncomfortable. But single thickness glass earrings can be larger because it's only a single thickness. You could also use the thin bullseye to get rid of some of that weight. but that also means they're extremely delicate. So if we ever did anything that was a single thickness, we would actually tell customers, even putting a little warning on the back that says these are really delicate, they can break, and just putting that little disclaimer to let people know that they were delicate.
And, and from a practical standpoint, 2 mil is more expensive than 3 mil.
Yes.
Your price is going to go up or your margin's going to go down.
That's a really good point. So yeah, so you can offset some of that weight, but definitely it'll increase your price a little bit. But I'll show you what some people have done, and then I'll show you my thoughts on it. You also may need to adjust firing schedules when you're doing earrings, especially if you're doing a single layer, because it'll start to curl up. Because if it's thinner than, Paul would always say, glass wants to be a 1/4 inch thick. I've had a slide with that exact quote. But if it's thinner than a 1/4 inch, it's going to try and bunch up, and surface tension is going to take over. I did find these on the internet. I don't have attributions on this one, but I'll tell you what my thoughts are here. So I think that they're pretty earrings, but I'm looking at them and seeing the single thickness. These are extremely delicate. So it's just one, if you wanted to do a design like that, you would have to kind of put that disclaimer on, or tell your customers, these are going to be very fragile. So just be very careful with them. The one on the left too, with the spikes, I guess down at the bottom, I have a jewelry teacher that would say over and over again, she would say, jewelry is not supposed to hurt. So I would say, be careful of your sharp corners, because somebody happens to fall asleep in it or whatever. You just want to make sure that the jewelry is comfortable and not sleep in it probably too. But the one over on the right hand side with the layered dichro, another interesting take on it. But that one probably is more sturdier than the ones on the left. So kind of an interesting opportunity there. Oh, and then I already talked about this. So, and Raku Bales, these are the earring bales, inexpensive, different sizes, several finishes. So on this one, as far as kind of what are your different options if you are wanting to do earrings. So this is one I found from Momo Glassworks on Etsy that I loved it. It's a Klimt, I guess, was the artist. They were kind of, it was inspired by his artwork. But one of the things you'll notice here is they have a little tiny loop up in the top. And that, as far as I can tell, is copper. And copper will darken whenever it's fired. So you'll have that oxidation. So when it's encased between the pieces of glass, it did oxidize a little bit, but what's on the top is going to be darker, almost a black. And then these did have, because it had some gold leaf and stuff in it, they did have sterling silver wires. But this was kind of interesting. And, some people will try and match that loop with the earrings, but I don't mind the contrast, actually. I think the contrast is kind of nice. There's also the Nichrome wire that you can get for doing fused glass, where if you were incorporating a little loop, you could use Nichrome. But sterling silver and copper will both oxidize. And we'll talk about that in a moment with another pair of earrings. But anytime you use sterling or copper, it's going to turn black in the kiln, and it might also discolor your glass. So just be careful of that. This one is an example of something a little bit similar, but if you're looking at it, you'll see that there's a little P-shaped wire that's sticking in the top. And you'll also notice that it's bright silver. And I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is that they used fine silver, because fine silver, which is that 0.999 pure silver, does not oxidize. So in your glass piece, if you were to embed a piece of fine silver wire, it's going to stay bright and silver. In fact, you might even be able to incorporate that into the design. But this one looks a little thick, so I don't, this could potentially pull out. I guess another consideration too is if you used fine silver actually melts at a higher temperature than sterling. So you can take it up. You would want to make sure that those firing temperatures didn't overlap with like the liquid temperature of fine silver, which I think is like 1800 degrees or so. But anyway, just know if you want to embed something that's silver, look for fine silver. And this one was from Etsy from For the People. Another thing to look here too is the ear wires. These ear wires, when you look at them, you'll see that there's a little coil on it. Sometimes this has a ball or a bead, but that flat part of the front part of the ear wire, that is actually a weak point. We used these kind of ear wires in the beginning when we did a lot of jewelry, and I don't have a mouse to show you, but the point where the coil is and the flattened part, that is a weak spot, and they would almost always break right there. So I got away from using these types. They were inexpensive, but they did break a bit, and we had some returns that we had to replace them. So another one, I found this one from Galaxy Glass Studio on Etsy. But I thought what was really nice about this pair is just the hole in the middle. And then my guess is that they used sterling silver wire to form a large jump ring. And then they have an extra jump ring and then the ear wire itself. And this is an example. This is one that doesn't have the flattened part, but it has a coil and a ball or a bead. And that's usually a little bit more expensive style of ear wire, but they're pretty common. You can also get them silver plated from places like Michael's. I would not do that. If you're going to put ear wires on your earrings, I would recommend either doing stainless steel, which is better if somebody has like a metal allergy, I guess, or do sterling silver. And we would always keep some extras. So if somebody said they had a sensitivity to a metal, we would have extras there that we could switch out and maybe offer them stainless or something else. Another type of setting that you might see in earrings, in this case, they had to drill a hole, but then it's just the ear wire that's threaded through the glass. Now on these, you can buy these with the ball on them, although they might have to be modified for glass. So if you were putting them through glass, that bottom part with the ball might have to be a little larger. So sometimes you might be able to buy those that work, but you could also make them yourselves. So you can use something like a creme brulee torch to heat up the end of the wire, and then it will ball up, and then you could make the ear wire yourself. That's one way to do it. The other thing about this one, something to consider, is that if you're using this type of setting, is that you have to drill a hole. And you can see on this one that the hole was drilled, but then they fired it again to give it the nice round edges on that. If you're trying to do kind of mass production, sometimes drilling those holes becomes tedious. So you just have to weigh that, and I would price accordingly. It's a little bit more effort, a little bit more of a cost, but then you can also sell those for a little bit more expensive price. And on this one's from Glass Elements on Etsy. And I would guess that it's a sterling silver wire. Another thing you could do is use fine silver. Fine silver actually balls up and makes a smoother ball than sterling usually. It takes some skill.
Kat, we've got a question online
Sure.
asking for sourcing for silver.
Yeah, I usually buy most of my silver from Rio Grande, which is out of Albuquerque. And so you can buy wire in different gauges, for example, so it's different thicknesses. And a lot of people will do, I would say probably most common when I'm making my own wires, I'm using 21 gauge. If I'm balling it up, sometimes I'm using fine silver, but fine silver is softer. So ideally probably a sterling silver, or what is argentium is another type of silver that doesn't tarnish. So I would say if you were trying this out and you wanted to do it yourself, actually my recommendation would probably be argentium silver 21 gauge wire. And it's just going to be a round wire. So, and then this one I saw was just kind of a variation on the earring. You know, you have a couple different jump rings. Another thing to know is that if you want to add jump rings to your piece, you can actually buy them from places like Rio Grande. So you don't necessarily have to make your own jump rings. You could buy them, but something that I would suggest, like as you go through this process, sometimes again, your value in making jewelry is going to be making the glass pieces. And so if you can buy a package of, you know, jump rings that are the right size, and then you're just having to assemble your pieces, it's quick. So it just takes one more thing off your plate so you can focus on making glass. And that can be cost effective. Okay, another one. In fact, something interesting I just noticed on this one, that's a faceted dichroic piece. I didn't notice that when I grabbed this picture. Anyway, this is a bezel setting. So bezel settings are kind of common with glass. It's something that I've done in the past where I actually fabricate. So if you ever hear me talk about fabrication of glass, I'm sorry, fabrication of silver, that's when you're taking sheet silver, maybe some wire. You can buy bezel, literally a roll of this flat wire. It's basically a bezel material. It's fine silver, because remember I said silver, fine silver is softer, so it'll bend over the glass a little bit easier, but you would have to fabricate something like that. However, I think these might be cast pieces. So there are out there on the internet, if you look for settings, you can buy these little settings that are bezel settings. And then if you can figure out how to get your glass the right size, maybe it's by weight, or maybe you're using a hole saw on a drill press, you could make the same size pieces and then have a setting that you could glue it into, and it looks like a fabricated setting. So that's something else to look at as well. And I've got more examples. This one I found, I'm in love with this. So this one was Bronwyn Heilman that I found on the internet. I think what's interesting about this is it does have an ear wire that has a hook on the back. So this is a really secure pair of earrings. It could also be fairly thin, but then riveting is done, you can even get riveting kits from Michaels, to be quite honest. There are even aluminum rivets that you can use to do this kind of technique that they have in the scrapbooking section. So you can do that. Guessing by the price of these earrings, I'm thinking that they did this with a sterling silver tube. And there's some methods with doing it, but basically you would put a piece of tubing in that's a little bit less, I guess, in diameter than the hole, and then you would flare the ends of it. And then they've used kind of an interesting ear wire, but the ear wire becomes part of that design. And again, that one's from Bronwyn Heilman. Now, one that you don't usually see bezel set earrings that are fused glass, but this is an example of where they've taken probably a bezel cup, which can be prefabricated. And you can sometimes just buy these settings and then glue your pieces in. If you had the silversmithing skills, though, you could actually create a bezel setting. But as you can imagine, one is a glue in. So you make your pieces, make a bunch of them and glue them in. Or are you fabricating each setting? You're going to have a different price point. So I can tell by this one from Laura Pettifar Designs, these are $98 on Etsy. My guess is that she's fabricating these settings with bezel wire and a sheet of silver, and then your ear wire, or sorry, your ear post on the back. But depending on how you want to work or how many you want to make, you could come up with a setting. You could purchase the setting where you just have to glue, or you could fabricate. And kind of along that line, I found these from Yumaboshi. What's nice about this one is that from their pictures, I can't tell if this is actually a bezel setting with a bezel around it, or if this is glued in. But it's kind of a classy and minimalistic piece, and it looks like they focus a lot on the glass itself. Now, if I go out to their site, well, it'll let me go out here. So I'll go ahead and show this. If you go out to their site, you can see a little bit more. See if it'll bring this up larger. There it is. And I can see that there's a very minimal bezel right there. That's not enough to go up over the glass. So that makes me think that this is actually a glue-in setting. And as I look at some of their other pieces on the website, they have other things that are glue-on bales. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting setting that was really nice as well.
Kat, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How hard is it to make your glass the exact size that it needs for a setting like that?
I think that in time, like if it's something like this that has that small bezel, I think you can be a little less precise. So if it's gluing in, you do a lot of testing in the beginning to see if you can get those consistent sizes. We would tend to go by, if we were making, say, like little round cabochons, we would cut 1/4 inch squares and then stack 2 of them.
Mhm.
And then that would generally get us about the same size. And so with testing, we figured out we were cutting by size. Sometimes we would weigh the glass. So if we knew that we found maybe we had a cabochon that was the perfect size, if we weighed it in grams, then we could figure out about how close we could get with cut pieces of glass.
Got it.
And in time, I mean, it takes a little bit of experimentation up front, but in the end, if you're able to glue those pieces in, then your production, especially if you're doing a lot, it goes much faster. So to fabricate a setting like this, if I were doing that from scratch, would probably take about maybe 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours from start to finish. But another thing to consider is if I were doing this and I knew I was going to be like maybe wholesaling my pieces, I might create the very first setting and then take it to somebody to have it cast and let them cast cast the earrings. And then I would just then glue the pieces into that piece. So if you have something that you like or a design that you've created that you like, you can always have it mass produced.
Mhm.
So, but that one, I've noticed I've started finding Yumaboshi's designs quite a bit, and I like those. This one I came across at the last minute, but this one, it's a piece of dichroic glass, and they fused it in such a way it could have even been in one of the molds to give it a little hole, and then they used chain. So you don't see that setting a lot. Again, it has a jump ring at the top, and then that's kind of a handmade looking ear wire. So I think that's nice. But you can tell here by the price. Anybody want to guess? $25, is that sterling silver? And the answer?
Probably not.
Probably not. My guess is that it's silver plated. The ear wires might be sterling because you could get those for a lower price, but the chain is most likely, I'm guessing, silver plated, unless they're underpricing their things. I would probably price it a little bit more. So another thing to consider is that your ear wires can be a design opportunity. A lot of people just, in the beginning, we just went out and got the cheapest ear wires we could. But over time, we realized that it could be part of the design and that people's perception of the value of our design, a lot of that also came from the ear wires. So some of the most expensive earrings that I have a pair of sterling earrings that was a gift from somebody, and I know they're around $200. They have the most simple ear wires you could ever imagine. But the focus is not on the ear wire, it's actually on the piece of sterling silver, the dangle. So I think that a lesson to take away from that is that handmade wires or wires that look like they're handmade can add perceived value to your jewelry. Another thing I mentioned earlier was metal sensitivity is really important, so pay attention to that. And also, especially if you're shipping things to the EU or Europe, they have a ban on nickel. So you can't sell jewelry in Europe, for example, that has nickel in it. So stainless steel and sterling are your best options, and avoid super cheap ear wires, especially the ones you get from Michael's. Those bags that you can get for like $6.99 that has 100 pairs. Yeah, those are going to be something that causes a problem. Now, if you're feeling like you want to take on making your own wires, you can learn how to do it. There are tons of YouTube videos on how to make ear wires, or there are some, quick and dirty things like this one, the Bead Buddy one-step ear wire maker for $24.99. You can make your own ear wires. And then like we talked about, you could pick up some wire, 21 gauge wire, maybe from Rio Grande. In fact, you'll see there, it says for 20, 22, and 24 gauge wire. For fused glass, I would not go lower than probably 22. 22 is going to be very fine. I usually use 21 gauge, and then 20 is fairly thick. If you have a heavy piece of fused glass though, and you have a very fine wire and it's putting weight on the hole on somebody's ear, it could actually tear. So I would say go for a little bit thicker wire to accommodate for the heaviness of your earring. I think that's a better choice. So, and those are pretty quick. But anyway, if you, like I said, if your value is in making beautiful glass, one of the things to consider is you could even go up to Etsy and then search handmade ear wires. And so the ones at the top here, oops, made of metal, which is that one up on the left-hand side, 10 of them for $7.50. So a pair of those sterling silver ear wires with a nice little ball, it's $1.50 a pair. And your time may be worth more than $1.50, you know, to make ear wires. I think the ones over here on the side, the Ray Pugh designs, 10 for $24. So what would that be? That would, I guess that would be what, $4.80 a pair, $5. But again, along the lines of adding something that really maybe adds a little perceived value to your piece, I think these are nice because it's probably not going to detract from your glass, because I think your glass is supposed to be the focal point of your earrings. But in this case, it's just kind of a nice subtle, you know, balled up, I guess, ball of wire there, and those are nice. Now with that though, you would have to add some sort of a jump ring or something to attach it to your glass piece. Or it could be one of the embedded wires as well, that would work. The one over on the left, Crystalist Supply, those are $5.75 a pair. So those are, you know, a little bit thicker wire, you can see, not as delicate. But again, something that you could fairly easily learn, you know, as you come up with your own designs or you're inspired by other designs, those are not hard to make. Betty Bright, $6.20 a pair. Those guys are gold filled. So there's gold plated and then there's gold filled. What gold filled is it's actually a thicker coating of gold on the outside, so they won't wear as much as something that's just plated. So at $6.20 a pair, that's actually a pretty fair price.
Those are beautiful.
Yeah, aren't they? They're very elegant. Really, really elegant. Another thing that you want to take a look at when you're shopping for wires on Etsy, you want to check what the estimated arrival time is, because the default is any time. And then you look at your other options by January 26th, January 29th, by February 5th. You also want to pay attention to where they're coming from, because many times I've ordered something and realized it's coming from China or Indonesia or India, and it's like a month to a month and a half for them to arrive. So if you are shopping on Etsy, be sure and check either that it's a US-based supplier or that it's going to get there in time. One of my worst horror stories was that we made a bunch of jewelry for Valentine's Day and our ear wires got delayed and we couldn't sell any earrings, which was our biggest seller. So there, if you scroll down, you'll see shop location. You just want to make sure that you know where your ear wires are coming from, so you know how long they'll be. All right. Now, another thing, this is one of the pre-made ones that I found, and I believe this, oh, there it is, Rings and Things is where this one came from. But this again would be one of those cases where you have a bezel setting, but it's a fixed size. It's 10 millimeters. So it would require some experimentation to make sure you could get your cabochons right, but they are sterling silver. It's a design where you have that catch on the back. There is a little jump ring there that you could use to have a dangle underneath it, but they come in at $8.74 per pair in sterling silver. But again, the difference between fabricating your setting and then buying one that's pre-made is that your pre-made one, you're gonna have to experiment to get the size right. If you're fabricating a setting, it can be any size you want. All right, so with that, I'll switch over and we'll talk about some pendants. And again, price point may dictate your setting. So for example, Raku is going to be one of your least expensive. If you ever check up on, say, like eBay or, you know, some other vendors, you can actually find some that are cheaper. AliExpress or Alibaba is a place where you can sometimes get large lots of bales. But something else that you might consider is there's a lot of sellers on Etsy that are buying large lots from overseas and then breaking them down into manageable packages. Because if you go through something like AliExpress or Alibaba, it might say you have to buy 10,000 bales. But like I said, some people on Etsy will package those up and sell them in smaller packages, or you can even get them on eBay. As you're looking at your different options like drilling holes or wrapping, doing some wire wrapping or wire framing, it's going to require a little bit more labor. But again, that's going to most likely be offset by a little bit more expensive price. You should get that money back. Bezel or prong settings are going to require some jewelry skills. But again, here's one, Yumaboshi. There's a wire wrapped pendant, which this has more of a kind of distinctive look to it. But one thing I can tell you, I absolutely love wire wrapped pendants, but there is probably a more limited market for these. So some people really like wire wrapped pendants, but the majority of people, I think in our experience when we did shows, they like the simplicity of the glue-on bale. So we tried a few of these and we didn't, the amount of price we had to add to it, I don't know that it paid off. But I think there's some gorgeous designs out there. And if that's something that speaks to you, there is a customer base that loves this style. But if you're going for a mass marketing thing, this is going to be more time intensive. And then it also is going to probably shrink your potential customer base a little bit. But very cool. Another example though, this one was from Love Life, Live Life up on Etsy. But you can see that there's a little tiny wire that goes around this pendant, and then it has a loop up on the top. Let me see if I actually put the link on this one. I didn't. Anyway, this came from a tutorial. They have a tutorial that's on their site. But whenever you create these kinds of pendants, you're using a grinder. So, when you're doing fused glass and you have one of those grinders you use for stained glass or fused glass, you replace the grinder head on that with one that has a groove head. So as you push your glass up around it, it's going to cut a groove around the piece. That groove then provides a place for that wire to wrap around it. So it's a very secure setting. Again, you're going to have a little bit more labor involved with this, but I've bought earrings that were like this, and I want to say that I paid maybe $60 for the pair of earrings that if it had glue-on bales, I probably would have paid $20. So you'll also see some of this style in galleries. So I think that's actually a nice option. Another one too, and we've shown Akala Designs glass on Etsy. This one, for example, you're going to be drilling a hole, but you can purchase things called pinch bales. And if you go up, a minute ago, I mentioned Rio Grande out of Albuquerque. There's some other ones too, like, Shipwreck Beads. There's a lot of the bead places that'll carry these as well that are plated. But when you get these pinch bales, you open them up and then you just squeeze them into that hole, and then you have a more decorative bale. If you get them from Rio Grande, theirs would almost always be sterling silver. So the perception of the value could go up a bit because of your bale. Another interesting thing that we talked about, Kim and Jenny and I talked about that we found, speaking of rings and things, we found a glass bezel. Now, I have never seen this used with glass, but it's kind of intriguing. It's sold by the 5-pack, which is $9. But if you look down there, look at the price, how it drops when you get to 10 or more. So you would get 5 of them for $3.76. When I saw this, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I think they're using it with resin, but I don't see why you couldn't make a fused glass piece that glued into this and then had a bale on the back. So it might be something interesting if somebody wanted to play around with it. Might give an interesting frame around your piece of glass. And I highlighted this so you could see the price difference. Another option I found too, and I've bought something like this in the past, but this one was on Amazon, and it is a sterling silver square bezel blank cup. The danger in using this one, I guess, is you do have to experiment to make sure that your glass is the right size for this. But this is going to be a low bezel that you could glue your piece of glass in. The Bale is incorporated in it. And this one is a small one. This, I don't know where that price is coming from, but you can see here, if I got one that was a 25 millimeter, it would be $16.60. So the cool thing about this one is that you can tell it whatever size you want and they'll make different sizes, or apparently you can contact the seller and you might be able to get custom sizes. It also comes in things like yellow gold plated, rose gold, copper plated, sterling silver. So there's some different options. I had bought these from another vendor in the past. Never knew that you could get them on Amazon, but you know, what can't you get on Amazon, right? Okay, so on this next one, we'll talk a little bit about prefabricated settings. And it looks like I forgot the title on that one. Shape is important. A circle and a square are going to be the easiest shapes for you to use if you're using a prefabricated setting. You also want to pay attention to the amount of your fire polish, because if you have cut a piece of glass and then you're going to put it in a pre-made setting, if you fire polish it to the point where it spreads out a little bit, it's not going to fit. So when I'm using my fire polish, I guess when I'm fire polishing my pieces, I might run it up to temperature and then just stop and run it right back down. At that point, you get really squared off edges and you have more control of the shape and size. The higher you go, the more rounded edges. It's easier to bezel set if you were fabricating, but it's going to adjust the size of your piece if you were going to be using a glue bezel. Some of the ones that you could get though, for example, we have the stamped bezel cup. And the way that you can tell that this is a stamped one is that the walls are not perfectly straight. So if you see over on the right-hand side, you can see that that flares out a bit, which means if you cut your glass to fit this exactly, the bezel actually flares out. And so I think that these are a little bit harder to set, and I wouldn't recommend them. They're generally less expensive though, because they're stamped out of very thin metal. And I wouldn't say that they're recommended for glass. If you were doing resin work or something, probably fine, or maybe little mosaics, but I think for fused glasses, it's not the best. The fabricated bezel cup though, this is one that is actually soldered. So they took a sheet of metal, they made the little bezel, and then they soldered the bezel to the flat piece of metal. So the walls are perfectly straight and they work great for glass. Then they also soldered the little jump ring up there, and you could even use a pinch bail, or you could add, you know, another jump ring to attach that to a cord. But the main thing here is it's created from sheet metal, plated or solid. They'll usually plate them. So they might make them out of brass and then they're silver plated, or they could be all sterling silver. They're going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's a better quality and your price would reflect that with your jewelry. And then another one that pops up, you see this in some of the jewelry groups. Again, round is going to be easier to set, but I just grabbed this example of an oval. But this is called gallery wire. And the nice thing about this is you can just plop your piece in there and then wrap those little prongs around it. It's extremely easy to set. You need to make sure that the height is taller for glass. Usually if you're making a capuchon, those are going to be a 1/4 inch thick. So you need to make sure that the height of that crown is high enough to wrap over and secure it. If it's not, you could put a little glue behind it, but that's also a religious debate in jewelry groups as well. They hate glue. But the one thing about this, though, my thought on it, I've seen people do this with simple pieces of glass, but because this is such a fancy bezel, it can in some ways detract from the design of your glass. Because what you're selling is your glass piece and your creativity. I think sometimes this setting can actually detract from your piece of glass. This one I thought was interesting too. This one is a glued setting from Mystical Opus Glass on Etsy. And they even mentioned the setting in their description, which is silver plated over brass. Now, if you're thinking that this almost looks kind of rustic, like you could have made it out of clay or something like that, you could have carved it out of wax, you could make a setting that looks something like this and have somebody else cast it. So if you needed to make like a glue setting, you're making all these little pieces of glass and you wanted to mass produce with a kind of a custom setting, that's actually something you could do. And I would say if anybody has questions about that, I'm more than happy to help you through the process if you think you want to do that. But in a nutshell, that was probably carved out of wax, and then they had somebody else fabricate it. In fact, I know this one was fabricated in Turkey. And then here's another example of a glue setting that I found on Alibaba, on AliExpress. So again, could be something where you make your piece of glass and just glue it in place. And then this one I found from AAE Glass. We used to make pendants like this a long time ago, but oh my goodness, cutting these out on a hole saw was, it could be trying for your relationship with your better half if you've recruited them to help. So I would say this requires a bit more work, and you definitely want to price accordingly. But they've used a pinch bail type or some sort of a bail that you could use with a donut pendant. And those could be interchangeable too, is another option. Something we used to do is we would create a bail, which is that top part that connects it to the necklace. We would have a sterling silver bail, but then have interchangeable glass pieces. That's something else to consider as well. So if that bail is more expensive, you could maybe offer 3 pendants that somebody could switch out and then charge $100. So. And another one, because at the last minute, I realized I didn't even talk about bracelets. So I found this online. This was Sundance Glass, but here's kind of an interesting bracelet with a slumped piece of glass on it. And I would assume that they've gotten these made somewhere. I don't think it's fabricated by the artist, but I think that it is something that they, just created the glass and then glued it onto a bracelet. This one is one of the more popular ones that you'll see. It is a plated bracelet set, I guess, and you can also adjust the length of it. So glue pads are easy. All you do is you take your E6000 or glue of choice, make some glass pieces and glue it together, and then you have a bracelet. We did have something similar to this with the bezel cups, with square bezel cups once, that was silver plated. We had a customer that wore it so much though that plating came off. So I think it's important to tell, kind of to let your customer know this is, occasional wear, it's good, but if you wear it all the time, that it is plated and it might wear. This one is not a pre-made finding, but Kim reminded us of this one at the last minute before the presentation. I just had to show it again because it's so gorgeous. But was it Sean Alcala? Is that it, Kim? Sean Alcala. And this is a fabricated setting. So this was actually made out of sheet silver, but $380. So you can see the price. I know when we sold bracelets like this, I want to say we priced them at about $36. But by adding, sterling silver and kind of stepping that up a bit, that's a $380 piece. And at some art galleries, I've seen them go, up to $1,000. This is not Alcala's design. I should fix that. That's not $380. I found this one online, but this was a link bracelet that has bezel settings with dichroic. And then we'll switch over to fabricated settings. Like I said before, fabricated settings are something that's going to require a little bit of experience or knowledge, or taking some lessons or looking at YouTube videos on how to create a fabricated setting. And this one was actually created out of some silver wire that, so if you saw it from the side, it has a bezel, which is that fine silver bezel. There is a backing plate, which was sheet silver, probably 24 gauge. And then they soldered this wire to it to make this nice design. The other thing too, if you did decide that you wanted to get into the bezel setting, you would get taller bezel wire, like the 1/4 inch bezel wire. It's that flat wire around it that folds over nicely and then keeps your piece secure. And that one's from silverbenchjewelry.com from Carolyn. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but Rayleigh glass piece. So it was a collaboration. This one is actually, it's grainy. I didn't notice it was grainy when I put it there. But this one is a simple prong setting. So what they did is they took their wire, they balled up the ends of it, drilled some holes through a sheet of silver, pushed those through, and then soldered them in place. And then they added the glass piece and just bent them over. So that's a fairly easy piece to create if you were soldering. In fact, the backing on that, that's called reticulated silver. If you overheat silver, that's what it does. It gets crinkly. So kind of looks like elephant skin. But anyway, if you were just starting out and wanting to practice, you could use copper for the back plate. That's less expensive, but it would require a little bit of soldering. So there's some tricks to that. I did find, did I put that in the wrong place? Nope. Anyway, this one I found online. The artist was unknown on this one, but you'll see that there's some cables and some beads, but these actually had those embedded loops. So this was a different setting. And it's not fabricated, so I'm not sure why I put it there, but that seems out of place. Anyway, another one, here's somebody's using a simple piece of glass that has some bubbles in it with a bezel setting, and then the back plate is just kind of ruffled. It's a Unix handmade. That would require some soldering, but a really unique piece. And I think it's almost like there's waves in the silver. The darkness that's on the background, by the way, is a patina. So you can darken your silver. But since this piece is clear, they had to be careful not to darken the inside of the bezel. So they would make that setting and then put the piece in and then bend it over. Another one I found too, this was kind of a fabricated setting, but they basically bent a piece of sterling silver tubing, soldered on a jump ring, and used a larger jump ring. And then you can see that they drilled a hole in the glass. Now this one was drilled, but not fired again. So you can see it has a little sharp edge around that hole, but another piece from Yumaboshi. You could even do something like this with an interchangeable piece, but require a little bit of metal smithing skills. This one is interesting too. This prong setting, it's a little rustic, but I think it's pretty fashionable. The cool thing about this is if you made this setting, you wouldn't have to worry about your glass piece being an exact size because those prongs are all splayed out. You put your piece of glass in there. I'd probably add a dot of glue just to make sure it stays, and then bend those prongs over. But it could be a different shape. It could be a different size. It's actually kind of a flexible design. From Fair Angelica, it was $145 for a piece of dichroic glass in sterling. So you can see how the pricing is working on that as well. The only other thing I could point out on this ring is a fixed ring size. So unless you were doing these custom for people, having to keep inventory of a lot of ring sizes can be a pain, but you could possibly adapt something like this to be an adjustable ring. And then Kim actually sent me a picture. It was too grainy, but we've talked about this before. Precious metal clay is another way that you could make settings. With a lower temperature fired PMC, you can put the cabochon, which is your piece of glass, you could put that in the clay and then build up a little bezel around it and fire it in place. You'll notice that this is fine silver, which means it doesn't oxidize. But your other option is that you could create a PMC setting that you like and then even send it out and have it mass produced. So it could be the first step in creating something that you'll have mass produced as well. The only drawback I can tell you on this is that it shrinks a bit. So whenever you're creating your piece, depending on the type of clay, it could shrink about 15% or possibly more. And then one other one, again, this is in the wrong place, wire weaving. We talked about wire wrapping. People who are good at wire weaving, my hat's off to them because it is incredibly delicate and beautiful. Coalescent Alchemy made this one, but you can see the fused glass piece in abstract shape with wire weaving. And the difference between the wire weaving and wire wrapping is that the wire weaving has kind of that larger wire that builds the frame and then the finer wire that is adding some decorative elements. It is fairly labor intensive, and so you definitely would want to price that up a bit. But with that, that's what I've got for now. So Yay. Wait, how'd we do on time? We did all right. Okay. Anybody, any questions? Should I unmute everybody? So
Pat, does the PMC actually stain your shelves like silver does?
some people will only, they'll have a kiln that they use for PMC. And I have one kiln that I use for everything. So I've got one of the smaller Paragon SC2s with, I have the little window on it. It's helpful to have the window. I use that one for enameling PMC and even small glass pieces, and I've never had a problem with it. I know some people are pretty particular about that. Another thing I can tell you too, and I forgot to mention, PMC actually comes in different types of metal as well. So there's copper, there's bronze, there's steel, there's all sorts of different types of that metal as well. But you can also make rubber molds. So like I said, if you were making a piece, you could actually get the 2-part mold putty, and you could create a mold and make a press mold of your PMC as well. So yeah. Oh, Diane. Let's see. What else could I say on that? Anybody got anything?
What were your most popular items, Kat, when you and Bobby were doing this for a living?
I would say we sold the most pendants because I pretty much dug in my heels and refused to do earrings. We realized pretty late in the game that earrings were popular, and as soon as we started making earrings, it became earrings. So the other one that was really popular, it's kind of weird, but we actually took scraps of glass, because sometimes we would have little scraps, and we would make tiny pendants and use the smallest Raku Bail, and we would put them in a little tray to attract kids. And so the kids would come, and the kids would want one of these little tiny pendants. You'd have to tell people they were a choking hazard, but we put it on a cord before we gave it to them. And the kids loved these little tiny bits of glass. And when mom came over, mom would find out, oh, it's like, look, it's glass. And then we would end up selling things to mom as well. But those little tiny pieces we had, we sold them for $10. So it was kind of a little grab bag, and people would use them for gifts as well. So if they had a friend, a quick gift giving thing, we would sell those. Mm-hmm. And sold a lot of them. But we call them little Katzes because Katze in German is cat, right?
Can you talk a little bit about the piece that I have of yours that is the
Yes.
donut pendant with the adjustable cord?
Yeah. Do I have? Is it the one that is just the donut with the cord?
Yes.
I'll bring one up because I actually have it on my website. Unless I've lost my domain recently and didn't know it. There it is.
Would be a nasty
Sometimes that
surprise.
happens. Okay, I've got one that's similar. Let me bring this up real quick. Here we go. That guy right there, is it something like that?
That's the one.
Yeah. So basically, when we did these, we used a hole saw. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think we cut the outer first and then the inner to make sure that we got them lined up. But it was just a large hole saw. We used a glass dish with water in it. And so we would actually drill those in a water dish with a standard drill press, like a Black & Decker drill press. They were time consuming. And I would say that although I loved them, they were so time consuming, we tried to sell them for a little bit more. I think I sold these for like 36 a piece, but I think it was because of the amount of time it took, it was kind of a break even, when all was said and done. But yeah, we just did kind of a little slip knot on the top. So, and it was an adjustable cord, but they were popular. We would usually sell out of them. So, and I found there was another one. This was a good example of the Raku Bail. This was a large bale, by the way, because I mentioned there were the different sizes. This was a large Raku, which I've never really seen those sold in the store unless I just missed it. But it was a little bit longer, more elegant. I think it had a nice large hole on it, which was nice. I'm trying to think. Let me see if there's any more of these. Oh, and like I said, when I've mentioned this in the past, when we would do jewelry, we would do large slabs, because then when we did our pendants, it was pretty much a, we could cut that up and make hundreds of pendants from a single slab. And that will be an upcoming class. Oh, here's the one I was looking at, Kim, that one. And you can see the difference between this one. This is a fully fused one. So you get that nice rounded edge on it.
Mhm.
Whereas the other one was more squared off edges. And I think I like this one a lot better.
I love this.
Yeah. And we had talked about dichro the other day. That little heart dichro right there was the one that I drew with a Sharpie marker on paper, scanned it in, and then I had that laser etched. It looks like it's hand drawn.
Mhm.
Those were laser etched by Austin Thin Films at dichro.com. Another one. This one was actually done in a microwave kiln. It was the ends of two puddles that I stuck next to each other, and it I loved it, and somebody bought it off my neck. Damn those people. But that was our packaging when we did it. So you can see here, we did a lot of pendants. And at that point, we had set a price point of about $20, which was in 2008 when everything had tanked. The economy had tanked and people weren't spending money. But we had set all of our pendants at $20. Even, gosh, did I sell earrings for 20 bucks? What was I thinking? Oh my. Anyway, yeah, that $20 price point at the time was fine, but over time we bumped that up. So anyway, did that answer your question, Kim?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else?
Do you have a source for the bezel cups that you showed?
Which ones? The ones that were soldered?
Maybe so. I didn't.
You know what? I
didn't see anything there, but I might have missed it.
Let me check. I might actually have to go back and find that one.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? I will add that to the the Fusing Friday post. It looks like I didn't put the source of that one, and I'll have to go find that one. But we used to, what was interesting is we used to have a source for these that did square ones, and they did large ones. They did bracelets where you had, imagine this piece. Oh, you can't see, right? Because I'm talking and not sharing. Is that right? Yeah.
That's right.
Sorry about that. I do that a bit, huh? Here, I'll just share the desktop. But if you can imagine,
yeah, I think that was the one.
Yeah, if you can imagine this piece with a jump ring on one side, we used to buy them that had a jump ring on the other side, and then it had an interchangeable wire bracelet. So for example, they sold small, medium, large. And so we could sell somebody that, the glass piece, and then they would choose whatever wire bracelet fit them, put it together. We could assemble it right there at the booth. And that was a really nice, very classy bracelet. And I think we sold that for $48. So, and it wasn't solid silver. It was a brass, it was fabricated from brass sheet, and then they plated it. It was a heavy plating, but I have not been able to find that supplier. That was kind of the inspiration for this presentation. But they did square, they did round. If you're looking for these kinds of settings, sometimes you can look for resin settings, because a lot of the resin artists will buy these, or even PMC, I'm sorry, not PMC, but polymer clay, that they will have these kinds of settings as well. So.
And Kat, there's a question online about how you think the economy is going to impact sales. Economy problems right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a couple things that are going on. I know there's talk of inflation and things like that. But something that's actually been different than was expected was during the pandemic, they expected that people weren't going to spend money, that people were leaving jobs or whatever, and that people were going to start like hunkering down and saving money. And, places like Amazon, I mean, Apple has sold more computers than ever. So I think that they sort of missed that. I think people are still spending money. They're not dining out as much. I think people actually have a little bit more, disposable income because they're not traveling, they're not eating out, they're not doing stuff like that. And a lot of retailers are actually seeing really good sales. So one lesson we did learn a while back is even in 2008 when things tanked, when we set things at $20, somebody told us that people will spend their hourly wage without really thinking about it. So that $20 price point we lucked into. But the year that things were tanking in 2008, we had $70,000 in sales that year on fused glass pendants and jewelry. So it's, I would guess that people are still going to be spending money. I think it should be fine. So.
And then somebody else wanted to know if you had an example of the kids pendants that you made.
I don't. I can see if I can find one. Let me make a note and see if I can find one. But they were just like the big ones. It was the scraps from the big pendants, but they were maybe a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Just scraps that I would just cut into little pieces and we wrapped them up. You saw my packaging were these pillow boxes that we had made. Let me show you again. Nope, it's not that one. There it is. So when we did this, when we had these packages made, they cost us 47 cents a piece. We had them printed and made in China. When I was finding the pillow boxes in the US, they were probably about 36 cents. But for 47 cents, I could get them printed. And then on the back, it had like, hey, this is fused glass. Please recycle this container. Here's our website address. If somebody bought one of the $10 pendants, the little tiny ones, we would wrap it up exactly like this. So they kind of felt like they were getting something special, and people responded to it. It's like they would come in and buy 10 of them. It was intended for the kids, but we found out a lot of people like that minimal, smaller jewelry, and they would come in and they would just scoop them up. So we got rid of our scrap. Our profit wasn't as much on these, but we sold a lot of them. And that cardboard, that display package that I have, those were about, I think they were 17 cents a piece. No, it was less than that. I think they were about 6 cents a piece when we had them made. So, but worked out well. But the tiny ones, if you can imagine, it's like any other of my jewelry pieces, but about a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 by 3/8. So just small. Anyway. Oh, and let me see. I'll make a note to see if I run across one while I'm cleaning my closet. So I don't know if you guys have been following all the stuff I'm finding in my closet. I post on Facebook. So anyway.
Is there a garage sale in your future?
Last time I did an online garage sale, I put something called an Apple Power CD on my website as a example, and somebody bought it, and I didn't mean for them to buy it.
Oh, no.
But I'm considering selling a bunch of my Apple stuff and putting it towards some sort of charity thing, kind of in my parents' name, because I've got a lot of it. So it's not every day though when you come across a VHS tape signed by Steve Wozniak in your closet, though. That's kind of fun. But anyway, anybody got any questions or thoughts or jewelry to show
I have
and
a
share?
question about chains.
Yeah. Oh, good question.
You used a lot of cords.
Yes.
They are a tough sale in the
Yes.
Pacific Northwest. So I'm just curious what other people have noticed.
That's a good question. So the questions about cords, chains, and probably brings up another question too, or I'll put it out there. A lot of the chains that I was selling, I was getting from Dreamland Jewelry. So I can put that in the chat if you want. But their prices are really reasonable. The chains seem to be a decent quality, and we would offer that as an upgrade. So we would take chains to the shows and have them available, or even stainless steel cables. We had even at one point tried, there were rubber cords. So we had some rubber cording. Some of them were upgraded with like sterling silver ends on rubber cording. So we tried different things, but we would generally, in our packaging, would include a cord. So that's actually what was holding it in that package. It's the double knotted cord, and it would hold it up tight to the front of the package. And we started doing that just because our stuff was hanging in the tent, and then people could just grab a package and go, and it was fast. Because if it was a big show, things were kind of crazy. But then we would offer the other upgrades. We would let people know that we had chains available if they wanted to upgrade that look. But I would be curious if anybody else has a good source for chains or anything that works for them. We used wax linen cord, and then we eventually transitioned to leather, which we got from Leather Cord USA. So they had really good prices, and we figured out a technique to make them, make something that at least they could wear it when they left, and it wasn't too expensive for us. So,
Kirsten, why do people object to the cords?
Yeah.
It's not perceived as art.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So I have to put sterling cords, chains on things.
Mm.
And I think in doing that too, then you're bumping your price up and you're kind of elevating it. So, even I noticed if we went to a craft fair, for example, and we did a craft fair, then our wax linen cords were perfect. $20 price point, wax linen cord, that was great. If we were doing a juried show somewhere, though, that's when we would have more of the sterling silver, the bezel setting. We were kind of bumping that up, by having the different settings. And in some cases, we even fashioned this little sterling silver decorative piece that would hang, and then you could interchange the little Raku Bales on that as well. So it sort of took a Raku Bail, but then dressed it up with this kind of a hammered sterling silver kind of attachment, I guess, made it look more like a fabricated pendant of some sort. So anyway, but yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it depends on your market, and it just depends on the price point. Definitely price point comes to mind. So
yeah, I think if it was an art fair where I was there representing it, that would be perceived differently than putting it in a shop or a gallery.
Exactly. Yeah, in a gallery, I would never put a leather cord on something. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Hold on, my Mac is telling me it's going to shut down soon.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
No, we're
Not that.
There it is. I just plugged. This is the first time I've been in my studio in probably 2 months, 3 months. So I forgot to plug in my power cord.
You know what I didn't see you talk about, Kat?
What's that?
And I have one of these on a pendant from Melina that is polymer clay, and it's the flat silver that comes up and curls.
Yes.
And makes a roll.
Yep.
That is so elegant.
They are elegant.
So beautiful. And expensive, I would imagine.
Let me find one for you real quick, because that's a
picture.
Yep, getting one right now.
It makes the pendant. I mean, her work is
really
off
does.
the hook anyway, but it really is. You end up seeing just a little tiny silver roll at the top. It's
like a little tube. It's a tube.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is just what I just got when I searched sterling silver Bale. Let's see if we can find one. There's a pinch Bale, by the way, up there. So that's what your pinch Bale looks like. Let's see. Let me search fused glass Bale. Oh, also another interesting thing, you might see it.
Oh, I know. I
This
know
guy.
what it is. It's like that little tube at the top.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, those are sweet.
In fact, this one says handcrafted sterling silver Bale. These you can buy
they're
these
called
pre-made.
slide bales. I think they're
Yeah.
called slides.
Yeah. So one of the things about these bales, they do have them, for example, is it going to come up here? It's not. Crud. Let me see if I can bring this one up. Yeah, see, here's a variation on it too, a wing Bale. Also, if you're searching, you might also search Bale, B-A-L-E. That's a religious debate as well, whether it's B-A-L-E or B-A-I-L. And see some of the different ones. But yeah, that tube. So some of these, if you're liking these guys, couple different things to consider. One is that there are a lot of them that you can buy with patterns on them that are silver plated. So make sure you look at whether it's silver plated or solid sterling silver. It just depends, on your price point that you're shooting for. The plated ones are going to be more affordable, but if you want it to last and be one that's, I guess, perceived at that higher value, like Melina's work is just stunning. I would definitely expect that she has sterling silver on hers. Yeah. But just trying to see. Another interesting though is that you can actually make them fairly easily. And that's what we ended up doing. Again, you have that question about what's your time worth though. Because all you need is basically there's a pair of pliers that is a straight barrel pair of wires. And then, pair of pliers. You cut your strip of metal. You could actually hammer it if you wanted an interesting texture. Putting a texture in metal can be as easy, literally, as taking a rawhide mallet, your piece of metal, putting it on concrete outside and hammering it. That will give you kind of a pebbly sort of sandy look to it. You could hammer basically, sandpaper. You could literally hammer, put sandpaper down, take your piece of metal and hammer it with your rawhide hammer. And then once that's done, you'd probably have to resoften it. You have to heat it up to soften it, but then you can bend it into one of those shapes. So one of the things about metal, if you're working with metal, is the more that you work it, the more it work hardens. So if you were to take a piece of wire and bend it into an ear wire, that wire might be fairly soft when you start, but by the time you've bent it, it work hardens it and it becomes much more strong and less likely to deform. So it's the same thing if you were going to make some little bales like those tube bales. You can cut a strip. You might want to hammer it flat. You might have to take a torch and heat it up, but then making that little tube is very easy. So just some.
And what gauge metal did you use for those?
I would probably use 24 gauge because if you go up to something like 20 gauge, it's really thick and it's going to be more expensive. There is something, actually, let me show you something interesting. You know what? I take that back. I would probably do 22 gauge. But if you were trying to go for, a lower price point and use a little bit less metal, I'll show you something that's really interesting. Has anybody ever heard of Joyce Chen? Do you know what that is?
I have one of her cleavers.
Yes, Joyce Chen has these beautiful little things here called her Joyce Chen kitchen shears, or the scissors. These scissors can cut metal. They can cut 24 gauge metal. Huh. And they usually are around, $20, $25 when you find them. You can get them on Amazon. Here's one at Ace Hardware, $26.99. But they're very easy to use, and you could cut 24 gauge metal. You could easily wrap that metal and then basically use that, glue it onto the back and make a bail. So
sounds so doable.
Yeah. Another thing you could do too, if you wanted something like a satin finish on the metal, you can even use something like, you can use steel wool. Steel wool will give you a brushed metal look. So.
And Kat, we have another question online. It says, what would I search for to find the grinder bit with the groove, or where would I find it?
Let me see if I can, I would say it's something like maybe his Glassworks. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Grooving bit glass grinder. I love that look, by the way. Absolutely love it. Here it is. Got it. I just found one on eBay. I'm just going to share my whole screen. Here we go. Okay, just found one. This is what you're looking for. In fact, this one says it's Ann Raku. So see, it is that little guy right there. And it just attaches to your glass grinder. And then, you know, it's a good idea to use something, you know, something like that. It has a, there it is. Oh, positioning for Nick's grinder mate. Oh, and it shows, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's the, you can see that's, I guess that represents the bit right up in here.
Oh,
And there's the grinder mate.
got it.
But, you know, easy to use. You just stick it on your grinder. You make that groove. You don't need to fire polish it again. You know, it is going to, of course, leave kind of a ground look where that groove is, but wires going in there. And to be quite honest, if I were doing that type of setting, I would use sterling silver wire or argentium wire, because I think it's not that expensive. But if you were telling somebody, you know, if you're selling that, it's like, oh, look, here's my glass and it's set in sterling silver. And I think the perception of that is that it's a more valuable piece. So
what I like about that technique is that it allows you to do interesting shapes like teardrops and diamonds and triangles.
Yes. Yeah, you can do any shape pretty much with that. So, and, you know, and I guess if it were doing, like if you did a moon shape or something, you'd have a hard time getting that to kind of stick in that inner curve. Mm-hmm. You might be able to even glue it, although I've never done that. So, but
so this is a little bit off topic, but a couple of years ago, Kat and I began designing findings for glass artists. Do you have any of those images? They're handy. And we looked at designing. We were going to cast these, and we looked at designing basically like a little cage or a little box that you could drop a piece of glass into. The chain would hold it in, and then you could take it out and put in a new one.
And I found one the other day. I actually found one in my closet, but now I'm not sure where it is. Oh, the joys of packing, right? Let me see if I can find, I think I named it Cage. Am I still sharing?
That kind of went away when we began doing online tutorials and stuff. So we could talk about visiting that again, because I still think it's a really good idea.
We could have an interactive design session where everybody gives input. That's another thought. But yeah, I don't have it here with me, but you know what? I'll make a note and I'll find those. Let's see, I have little Katz's and then Kim and Kat's jewelry. You know, we should probably get Melina in there too. And Katie, oh my God, we've got so many talented, Bobby, so many talented jewelry artists. I did find this is sitting on my desk. So that was one of my crazy pieces. And then
I really hope you'll do a tutorial on that stuff really soon.
I need to, yeah.
Sometime this year would be great.
I know,
At Helios.
I would love to do that at Helios. We actually taught the Cavachon class. But Yeah, I taught it at Helios a little
Save a
while
spot
back.
for me.
Hey, come on down. So
It's
yeah, there's just something really great about melting stuff in unpredictable ways, right? I think, yeah, for me, I love that moment. Lots of people do when you open the kiln and something unexpected has happened. I just love that. So that's pretty fun. Oh,
As long as it's not something has blown up. Your kiln has overfired, and so you have a mold that is now liquid and liquefying kiln brick.
not good. Not good.
It was only
feel
molten
disaster.
lava, Jenny.
What?
Come on.
It was only molten lava.
Who needed that kiln anyway?